My next guest calls it Trump's cheat code for authoritarianism. The author of that piece joins us now, principal at Red Branch Consulting and former senior counsel during the Whitewater investigation, Paul Rosenzweig, and also with us, MSNBC senior national and political correspondent. We got it right that time, Jacob Soboroff. Lisa Rubin is still here. All right, Paul, this is your piece. Lay out how Donald Trump is using these emergency powers.
Emergency powers have a long history, and they make a lot of sense in the context of real emergencies. Think 9/11 or even the COVID crisis. What Donald Trump is doing is falsely declaring emergencies in situations that under no reasonable construction of the law or of the facts are emergencies in the accepted sense of the word, and using the deference that courts give him in that declaration to aggrandize to himself emergency powers and send the National Guard to Los Angeles, invoke the Alien Enemies Act to send Venezuelans back to Venezuela, or to federalize the police in Washington, D.C.
I want to put it back on the screen, a list of past presidents and how many emergency orders they've used. And it'll probably jump out at you that, you know, President Bush used 14, Clinton used 17, Obama used 12. How is what Trump is doing different?
Well, I mean, it's different in a couple of ways. The first, of course, is the volume. Yeah, we're barely 8 months into the presidency, and he's already, getting up there in numbers. But the second is the fictitious creation of emergencies where they really don't exist. I mean, take the one that probably will be the first one to the Supreme Court, which is the declaration of a tariff emergency. The tariff laws allow the president to take certain extraordinary economic actions in times of crisis. President Bush used that same statute to freeze terrorist assets in the wake of 9/11, and we kind of like that as a thing. But what President Trump has done has declared the trade deficit to be an emergency. Now, you can have a view of whether the trade deficit is good or bad, too high or too low, but the fact of the matter is it's been around for dozens, if not tens of dozens of years, at least since World War II. We've been in a deficit situation most years, so it isn't an emergency. And if the trade deficit is an emergency, then just about anything that's a persistent problem in the United States is an emergency under Trump's view of the law.
How is the Supreme Court likely, Lisa, to view this? I mean, they have been so deferential to executive power, so deferential to Donald Trump more specifically. Certainly some of the justices, you can imagine, might be personally big fans of Donald Trump. How might they view all of these different ways in which he's using emergency powers, the ones that they haven't looked at so far?
Well, look, I think when and if one of these cases comes before the Supreme Court, and I tend to agree that the tariffs case is likelier to come there first before some of the immigration ones, I think this is a court that will say they have the power to review statutes, that remains with them. And based on that, they may say Trump doesn't have the emergency powers he thinks he has because there is no emergency. I'm thinking, for example, Katie, about the Fifth Circuit's decision yesterday in the Alien Enemies Act case, where a 2-1 majority said, hey, look, yes, you have this power, but this isn't an incursion or an invasion. Mass immigration is not the same as an armed invasion by a country. It's that kind of statutory interpretation that I think this court, even with all of its Trump fans, may be inclined toward when one of these cases reaches it.
Jacob, he's been using it on immigration more aggressively than in other places. Well, actually, I don't know. It's pretty aggressive across the board.
He did in the first term as well.
Yeah.
And I can't speak. The cheat code thing I love. I can't speak to the legalese of it, but I can tell you what it looks like on the ground. In 2019, when I was down at the border, we did a huge special. Chris Hayes went down to El Paso. We were all there together. President Trump wasn't getting the money he wanted for the border wall, so he declared that there was an invasion and that it was a crisis along the border, that it was a national emergency. But the facts just didn't back that up. You still had children going across from Juarez to El Paso every single day. Drugs were coming through the legal ports of entry, not through the in-between parts. These are manufactured, obviously, emergencies. And I'm telling you that as a journalist who's been on the ground to see them. Same thing in L.A. Tom Homan said to me, we're going to be here every single day, doing these types of raids every single day in L.A., But based on what? Looking for who? And what they ended up doing is going after not the worst of the worst, but as I've been calling them, people like Nori, the best of the best.
They keep saying that L.A. would not exist if it were not for Donald Trump sending these troops.
It is the most ridiculous, preposterous, absurd thing that I have ever heard. Obviously, I live there. Lisa's from there. We're all from there. L.A. is the same wonderful place it's always been. Every city has challenges.
L.A. wasn't even in real great danger of burning down or
Katie,
during the L.A. riots.
It was in a 2-square-block area, the protests. And from what I saw, it was largely peaceful, other than people who were getting upset that the deployed troops who were there because of the emergency were getting in between their right of peaceful protest and the federal immigration agents would come on.
Yeah, but they're able to work off of singular images, distinct images. They'll take a still of somebody appearing to, throw a Molotov
or a
cocktail.
Mexican
Maybe
flag,
they are,
for instance, yeah.
And they will campaign off that one image or that tight shot, and then say to the country, "Look what we are doing," because not everybody is in Los Angeles, not everybody knows Los Angeles. They don't see the full scope of it. I want to ask Paul one more question. I started off this segment, Paul, with an allusion to Viktor Orban. He's been somebody that people have been comparing Donald Trump to. There is talk about the first year of democracies moving toward authoritarianism look a lot like this first year, maybe not even as fast as this first year has gone. Is that alarmist? Is it fair?
I think we're on the cusp of deciding that question. I mean, it strikes me that the next few months are critical. What the Supreme Court does with the first true emergency case that comes to it on the merits is critical. If they defer to Trump, if they say, as they might, we're not going to look behind the declaration, then it's game over. Then the president can declare the budget deficit an emergency and raise taxes without so much as a by your leave. If the court invokes its authority and steps between Trump and the aggrandizement of power, then it may prove that we were alarmist, or maybe more accurately, that we dodged the bullet. So I think that it's time for very grave concern, but I'm not going to pull the plug just yet completely.